Have you ever met somebody who's learning another language and they're fluent but unnatural? This is something that I've met a lot here in Thailand and across the region, learning languages like Chinese and Indonesian. But I want to use Thai here as an example, but I think this can be applied to many other languages. Over the years, I've worked with many governments, militaries, and ambassadors who get sent to the region, and as part of their posting here, they're needing to learn Thai, or some of them have learned Lao and they're posted in Thai because they're working between Thailand and Laos. As I started to work with these people, and there was one government's military in particular I had a long-term contract with, and they would send their soldiers to me for anything from 2 to 5 days so that they could get their chops back up in the language so they could go back and sit the DLPT or the equivalent in their country, that's the Defense Language Proficiency Test, and receive their language allowance for another year. Now, most of these people were actively using the language in their job. Also, with that particular government's military, I worked with the people on the ground here from the different forces and even sometimes their families who would come in who wanted to polish up their language. Now, most of them had attained a certain degree of the language back home in their mother country. And when they got here to Thailand, even though some of them had scored a 3 in their exams, which is the highest for their professional working, it's what they needed to get their allowance and indeed their posting here in Thailand, their language wasn't cutting it when it came to actually getting down on the streets and using the language. Their language was, for all intents and purposes, fluent, yeah, but not natural. And that actually had a real effect on the way that they were able to function in their positions. And so I wanted to share with you what my findings were from working with these people, some of the common things that I found, how we fixed it, and how you might be able to avoid developing this fluency that doesn't sound natural. If you're going to be developing fluency, you want it to sound natural, and it has to start from the start. Now, the meaning of fluency can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and depending on what context, I could also use the word fluency to mean different things depending on what we're talking about. But here, I want to use the word fluency in the sense that you can just be in a situation, you can use the language with the natives of that country to get things done that you need to get done. Some people talk about the bar test. That is, that you can go into a bar into the country that speaks that language, sit at a bar for an hour and have a conversation with one of the locals in their language and not be confused. And you be able to speak their language, them speaking their language with you, and the conversation will go on normally. So the number one thing that I noticed that was stopping fluent speakers from sounding natural was the way that they spoke the language. They spoke almost too precisely. Spoken in other clips recently about the necessity to know your tone rules when you're speaking Thai and when you're reading Thai. And a lot of the time, these people who have learned with military programs back home or government programs back home, you might come from the States and you've learned at West Point or some other place, and there's been a lot of time put into the rules and reading through all of these texts that have been painstakingly put together for you. But what happens is that they start to become hyper-corrective on the rules and the language starts to sound unnatural. And if you go back to that clip that I put out a couple of days ago on the tone rules are prescriptive, not descriptive. And so they're describing what native speakers are doing when they speak, not necessarily saying that you have to be exactly like this. And so a lot of foreign learners and a lot of these military learners, they would learn that the low tone must start here, and stop here. The high tone must start at this pitch, nam, and finish there. The common tone must be here, common. And that's all fine when you're just learning and understanding the concept of pitch and registers in the voice. But when it comes to actually speaking the language, you realize that these are just that. They're just concepts. And then when you start to let the language live in you, you don't have to be so precise, because as long as your throat's doing the right thing, it'll fall into these positions, and it's not the pitch. The pitch is just a byproduct of everything the throat's doing. I sound like a broken record from the other day's clip, but it's true. And so what these people would be doing is, so supposing we wanted to say, oh, what time's grandma getting home tomorrow? พรุ่งนี้ยายจะกลับบ้านกี่โมง? Okay, they might say a little faster. พรุ่งนี้ยายจะกลับบ้านกี่โมง? And sure, you got every one of those tones spot on. But that just sounds unnatural. You're over enunciating, you're over pronouncing the words. So how would a normal Thai say that? พรุ่งนี้ยายจะกลับบ้านกี่โมง? พรุ่งนี้ 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 พรุ่งนี้. Can you see that? I'm not saying พรุ่งนี้. I'm not finishing each tone to get the entire contour. The contours are just concepts, but the actual flow of speech rides on the wave of those concepts. And so, พรุ่งนี้ พรุ่งนี้, I don't even get the full พรุ่ง and then นี้. My tongue is already hitting in on the นี้ for tomorrow. พรุ่งนี้ พรุ่งนี้ พรุ่งนี้, พรุ่ง. See, my tongue's here and the back of my throat's closed for the NG on the พรุ่ง. พรุ่งนี้ ยายจะกลับบ้าน ยาย 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 ยาย. Now, ยาย is grandma. The word for big, ยาย. So if I said ยายจะกลับบ้าน ยายจะ I'm not saying ยายจะ, but ยายจะ. It's just knocking my throat down a little bit. I don't need to fully enunciate the จะ, but just as long as ยาย is here with a normal voice and จะ, you can feel the locking down of your voice. Now if I said ยายจะ, okay, that would throw somebody off because my throat's locking down too early. So ใหญ่ sounds like the word for big. Which a Thai would lock into. They're not necessarily listening for the pitch, but they just see this tension in my voice. That's what happens when you're saying the word big. So why would big be coming home? Oh, it's yai, grandma. So if you wanted to hear the difference, now I know grammatically it's not correct, but if you want to say grandma's house, ban yai. If you want to say the big house, ban yai. Now, properly you would say บ้านของยาย and บ้านหลังใหญ่ for a big house. บ้านของยาย the house of grandma. บ้านหลังใหญ่ the big house. หลัง being the measure word for houses. Native Thai speakers would get it just from the actions on what's happening in the throat, not necessarily the pitch. บ้านใหญ่ บ้านใหญ่. You can hear it. And again, it's the length, it's everything that's going in there. So what these fluent speakers would be doing, which was making their language sound unnatural, is that they were giving equal weighting to each word within a sentence, ultimately making it sound like they're almost a robot, and it's wrong. And the sad thing, if they said, พรุ่งนี้ยายจะกลับบ้านกี่โมง พรุ่งนี้ยายจะกลับบ้านกี่โมง It's almost like speaking to a kid, and the response that would come back to them was unnatural. Now, depending on what you're doing in your job, you don't want that to happen. If you're in high-level meetings with a bunch of generals and they're needing to use normal Thai, and a lot of these generals, you know, they're like we'd say, nakleng, they're real sort of like power people, and they're sort of slap on the back. They don't want to be speaking like you speak to a child when they're speaking to somebody who's supposed to be on their same level. So you need to get this prosody. You need to get these rhythms into your voice, and over-enunciating, being overly correct, is going to make you sound unnatural and could work against you in your job. Another big thing that I noticed with these people who had fluency in the language but was unnatural is because a lot of these people, they learnt the language in order to pass the exams so that they could actually get their postings. And those postings, for many of them, might be as analysts. Maybe they're not even being posted abroad. They're working still in their home country. And so actually using the language is not something that they're doing every day. And so when it finally comes to hitting the ground here in Thailand, yeah, they understand everything, and they could read the most complex text or listen to an intercept, be able to understand all of the meaning that was going on. But when it came to speak, bang, they hit a wall because they didn't really put a lot of effort into the speaking. They didn't put a lot of effort into pronouncing things naturally. They were just pronouncing them good enough to get past their exams or to perform their duty as an analyst. And you don't have to be in the military for this to apply. Many people just learn to read, and then they learn all of their language from reading, and then after reading for months and months, maybe they'll go out and try and start to use what they thought that they had learned, but they realized that as they were reading this stuff, it wasn't actually active language in them, and so the language doesn't really render itself on the street. And another thing that I think is an impediment in sounding natural, even though you have so-called fluency, is that sounds of the language of your mother tongue, you just plow through and you say those sounds however you want. And you are speaking fluently, you are speaking with, say, the right terms even that people would use in colloquial language. So say colloquial Thai, but it could be Chinese or Indonesian, but you're saying them in your own sound system. And so, for example, I've noticed a lot of people from southern United States, they'll have these glides. So or becomes sala oh. So for example, saw so would be saw so, and you're getting these glides. And imagine that for every single vowel that they're getting these versions of the English language. It doesn't have to be Southern American dialect, but whatever English or other language you speak, if you superimpose those sounds over your language, it doesn't matter how big your vocabulary is, it doesn't matter how much slang or colloquial language you know, Thai is not like English where we have many different accents. I mentioned this in my past clip. Despite how much of the language you know, the person speaking to you is going to put a brick wall up thinking, this sounds too foreign, I'm not going to understand it, I'm just going to shut down. And so again, we needed to go back and rebuild the sounds on all of these. And for some people, that's really tough. It's not just tough physically to do it, but emotionally, because some of these people have put in years into learning the language up to the level that they think it is. And then as soon as they hit the ground, bang, they realize that actually what they had developed is not really functional on the ground. And it's a kick in the teeth for some people because back in school, they may have been the top dog back in their own country. And when they get here, people who may have even scored lower on their proficiency exams actually function better on the streets. And these people who scored higher struggle to really fit in with the local community when they're speaking the language. So there you go, that's my rant for today, but I think it's a really important point. Focusing on developing fluency is fantastic, and maybe you've got a goal like one of these DLPT exams, or you might be going for the Chulalongkorn proficiency exam. I actually did that in order to be able to get these contracts, and I would say that that Chula proficiency exam is fantastic. I even suspect that if native Thais took the full exam, they would even struggle to get full marks in it because it is such a good exam. It really pushes your limits in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Even if you are looking at passing exam and that's your main goal, focus on sounding natural and fluent, not just fluent. Yeah, fluency might pass you through that exam, but when it comes to the real world, you might find that you've got a lot of unlearning to do. It's just not necessary. Don't forget to subscribe, come and join Minecraft, order your copy of Cracking Thai Fundamentals. I'm Stuart J. Raj. I'll see you on the other side.